This is our one-on-one segment for this month, and our visit today going to be with Kris Atteberry, the announcer with the Minnesota Twins. Has been around for a number of years, seen a lot of things. But Kris Atteberry, we have never seen what we have seen, what's going on this year with COVID-19, have we?
Well, unless you're around for the 1918 flu epidemic, I would say no. We haven't. We've never seen anything like this. Probably the closest comparison is probably the 9/11 interruption of the season. But even then, we were able to get back to baseball before the snow flew, and so this is really uncharted waters for all of us, and everyone has to navigate it on a personal and a public level, and it's really been something.
Yeah, I want to talk more about that in just a moment, but one-on-one is all about learning about our guest as well. So, Kris, if you could tell us a little bit about your background, where you grew up, what got you into baseball.
It's the standard big league broadcaster background. I grew up in Montana. I went to a one-room schoolhouse. I went from a one-room schoolhouse to being a scholarship student at a private boarding school in Connecticut. Then went to Stanford University, where I really kind of honed my broadcasting chops at a student radio station. So the natural move from Stanford then was to move to Cody, Wyoming, and work doing high school sports and bowling frozen turkeys down the aisle of grocery stores every fall for a couple of years. And from there to the minor leagues, and I was an 8-year overnight sensation into the big leagues. So that's kind of my short synopsis of how I got where I am.
One of the things that we have learned about Kris Atteberry, listening on KTRF, is the fact that you really know the game and the teams, and that's what's half of the fun, I think, as a listener on the radio, is you want to know things about what's happening out on the field and about the players, and you seem to know a lot about the players. How important is it to have knowledge of the game and the players?
Well, I think that's everything. If you're just out there and telling me where the ball is, but you don't understand why or where it could go or who the people involved are, I just don't think it's very interesting. I think our whole job is that in this day and age, there's so much information available. You could tell on any given pitch how hard it was thrown, what its spin rate was, what kind of movement it had, what the velocity of it off the bat was, what the probability that it would be caught was. But what you can't learn is what the guy who threw it thinks about the guy he's facing today. Where is he currently in terms of kind of his mindset? What's the story about him? How does he think? Why does he play? Where did he come from? Kind of to the root of your one-on-one segment. So I think that's kind of our job, is to take these stick figures in uniform and humanize them. Because, if you put everybody who's ever worn a big league uniform into Target Field, ever in the history of Major League Baseball, every team, you would have less than half capacity of Target Field. That's not very many people. So to me, the story of how they got there and how they're able to stay that's like 18,000 utterly unique stories. And it's our job to tell those stories. And I've always stressed that if you can learn it from your phone, then I probably don't need to be repeating it to you during the broadcast. I don't need to tell you to go read an article. You can go read the article. But what you can't do is ride the bus to the ballpark with the pitching coach. So maybe I need to focus my energy on what that conversation was all about in terms of being able to share something from it to give you a unique window to look at the game that you might not otherwise have. And for me, the key to that, the key is saying that I know the game, and I think I do, but compared to a lot of the people I'm around on a daily basis, not even a drop of it, right? And so the key is to shut up. I think more than anything, like for all your years working in baseball, just be quiet and listen to people and ask questions. And the less you talk when you're on the bus, in the clubhouse, have those opportunities to be around people who have seen and done things that you haven't seen and done, whatever the field is. The more you're going to learn about it. When I was in the minors with the St. Paul Saints, I sat behind Wayne Terwilliger on bus rides. Twig, of course, famously around here, the first base coach, first got a high-five Kirby Puckett, when he hit that Game 6 home run. But Twig also was at UG as a Marine. He was at Saipan. He was on the cover of Life magazine as a Marine in World War II. He was in the dugout when Bobby Thompson hit the shot heard around the world. He was Ted Williams' third base coach. He turned double plays with Jackie Robinson. Like, I just would zip it up and listen to Twig talk, and you can learn more about baseball and life listening to him talk somewhere between Sioux City and Schaumburg than you ever could from a book or a movie, that's for sure.
Yeah, no doubt. We're visiting with Kris Atteberry on our one-on-one segment on Thief River Falls Radio. One other thing I want to know, Kris, before we talk a little bit about the Twins this year, chemistry. It's important with broadcasters to have good chemistry with the guys you work with, and it seems that whether it's Corey Provis, whether it's Dan Gladden that you're working with, or yourself, you guys seem to have pretty good chemistry. How important is that?
I think it's important. I think it's really funny because I grew up like everybody, just assuming that the guys who broadcast games together were all buddies. And then I got in the industry and I was like, nope.
Yeah. That's right.
Yes, that's not true. I think that the beauty of what we have with Tony and Danny and I is that we are all completely different. Danny's Danny, right? He really doesn't have a ton of use for the regular rules of the English language. But he's got a crazy amount of experience. He's rough and tumble and not afraid to tell you about it. Corey's a high school theater nerd, in his words, who kind of builds up his image as such. And then I'm kind of somewhere in the middle. So I think that's kind of nice because 3 sets of eyes, 3 different brains, 3 very different perspectives. And I think that that's probably good because if we were all exactly the same, that'd get pretty boring.
Yeah. All right, Kris, and finally, with COVID and how we started this off, COVID-19, at the time of this interview, we haven't gotten going as of yet, but we're hoping maybe here 4th of July, somewhere in July, that the games actually get going. Right now, what are you doing? What are you hearing from the players? What's keeping you busy or what keeps you going until that first pitch?
Well, right this second, I'm walking my dog. Which is perfect because I've got a German Short Pointer and we walk about 10 miles a day. We live in Minneapolis and that's literally all we do. My wife works from home, so she's making big corporate decisions in one room of our small house. Our daughter just finished school yesterday, but until today she was busy doing school in one room of the small house, and so the dog and I were basically told to get lost. So we didn't interrupt either of them. As far as the baseball stuff, I'm doing a weekly podcast called the Twins Clubhouse. Wherever you find Twins podcasts, you can dig down into a Jim Pop this week. Last week Joe Mauer joined us, so that's nice to keep my hands in it. And then I wish I could tell you I had some deep secret, relevant inside information about how to get going for the season, but I don't. I spent a lot of time calling my boss and asking questions. What do you think? When are we doing it? How's it going to look? And right now, with the thought that baseball is coming back, the big challenge we have is to try to figure out how we can broadcast it without all those things that we mentioned earlier in the conversation. We're not riding the bus together. We're not talking together. We don't have unfettered access, which has always been our greatest gift. And we may never get it back no matter if COVID, whatever happens with COVID. So how do you go about bringing a ball game to life when no one's in the stadium, including perhaps a game you're in the stadium? Maybe you're watching on TV and trying to recreate it. That's a big challenge. How do I, in our pregame shows that are so heavy with player interaction and content, if that access doesn't exist, which it's not going to, how do we reconfigure so that you guys are entertained and you learn something about the game without us having the ability to ask the people who traditionally can answer those questions? So all of those are pretty monumental challenges, and I think we're up to it. And if we're not, then they should find somebody who is to do our job. So that's kind of how we're going about it. And then other than that, I'm just honestly, 21 years doing this, I'm never home this time of year. I have dinner with my family 3 times a month, maybe. So I'm just enjoying every second I get to be with them.
Awesome. All right, Kris, we appreciate you taking some time out of your schedule, even if it is with the dog, and visiting with us on KTRF. We appreciate it. We're hoping for a season yet, and we're hoping to hear you guys on the air. So we appreciate your time today, Kris.
Well, I appreciate you having me on, and it's been far too long since I was up there watching Drew Gutierrez and Jeff Manship try to skate with the Prowlers in advance of the state tournament. So it's been too long since I've been in your neck of the woods, and hopefully we'll be back up there before too long as well.
Awesome. Real good. Thanks, Kris.
My pleasure.
Our one-on-one segment with Kris Atteberry, announcer with the Minnesota Twins from Thief River Falls Radio.